What's going on, guys? How you doing? All right, let's settle in here. I have a interesting video for you guys today. I have a review by request, believe it or not. Last night I was talking to a good buddy of mine in the knife community, and he asked me to do a, as he put it, honest review of the Jack Wolf Knives Gunslinger Jack right here. So, a little bit of background, if you guys don't know Jack Wolf's Knives, they have hit the ground running in the industry, producing a lot of traditional slip joints in a modern way. And they have been the darling, oh my God, of the knife community recently. And, you know, my friend was a little concerned that there was a little too much hype around this brand, and especially for the price of these knives. And let's get that out of the way. This Gunslinger Jack, which is their first folding knife, is $350. Now, if you guys know me, I don't pull punches, I don't kowtow to any particular brands, and I definitely don't pull punches, even though it gets me hate mail sometimes. Now, having said that, let's kind of dig into this guy. This is their first folding knife, and it's kind of inspired by traditional knife patterns. By traditional knife, I do mean slip joints. And it has this beautiful clip point blade here, which you can see I just used this weekend, made out of S90V. Titanium bolsters, love this detail, love having a bit of titanium at the end. It has anodized back spacer, anodized pocket clip, purple, haze fat carbon, which is super sexy. It's a bolster lock, which I love, and nice little details like the blade continuing, without a gap into the back spacer. So really like a well-considered and aesthetically very pretty design. And when asked about what I feel or how I would describe this knife, I consider it kind of jewel-like. It's pocket jewelry, it's pretty, but it's also quite useful. I mean, there's no question that this S90V blade is really, really slicey. Comes down to really thin behind the edge due to it being hollow ground. I don't know if you'll be able to really see that very well, but it's a nice thin blade to begin with. Let's do the makeup approach. There we go. You can see it's got a nice taper to the tip. So combine that with the hollow grind and this thing can cut. Ergos with this guy are pretty damn good. Even for my double extra large hands, you can see that this little transition, I can get my 2 fingers here, get my 4 fingers here, and I've got a nice solid grip on this thing. Opening methods are pretty straightforward. You can use the little nail nick right here to reverse flick it, which is my preferred method, or you can use this little protrusion right up here, this tiny little protrusion to front flip it, which here's where my criticisms begin. With this tiny little protrusion here at the top of the knife, it is doable, obviously, right? I can hit it multiple times in a row. It's not really a problem for me to use it as a front flipper. I'm not really a huge front flipper guy, to be honest. I know I've designed the Momentum, and the Momentum is beloved, but there's also a reason why it has thumb studs. Having said that, right, this little front flipper with its tiny little tab right there, like I showed you guys, is bordering on too small, because with this sort of like these edges right here, so here, let me bring this in so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about, okay? This curved surface comes to a very abrupt end. There is no radiusing here at these edges. It's literally a very sharp transition. And I'll get into that more later. But sometimes my thumb can kind of hit those edges. And just like you saw here, I can fail that front flipping action, okay? So, yes, while you can front flip it, and you can front flip it consistently, it would do better with a slightly meatier flipper tab there on top. And for me, also kind of doing this style reverse flick, or not reverse flick, but like finger flick, where you use your index finger to roll over it, is particularly precarious because there's just not enough meat there to get good leverage. Now, sometimes I can get it, but more often than not, this very sharp and narrow tip right here will actually catch me right in the palm. And I've caused myself to bleed on more than one occasion. Not because I'm inexperienced with front flippers, but it's literally that lack of leverage that when you do finally pop it, the blade kind of, you know, you're having to squeeze so much that you rotate it into your hand, and then boom, the thing just, I won't say stabs you, but it gets you. It definitely can get you. I can at least say that that's happened to me on 4 to 6 occasions. Now, let's talk about some of my criticisms. When I got into this knife, you know, I knew that I would dig it. I knew that I would dig the mix of traditional and modern and all of that stuff. It's actually a combination that I've thought about doing myself, right? However, there are some things that don't necessarily translate, and I think are missed opportunities here by Jack Wolf's Knives to add a level of refinement to this knife. And I would highly recommend that if they're going to continue doing locking knives, that they really, really consider. Because at $350, your consumers are going to be very nitpicky. Kind of like how I'm about to be. So let me show you. As I mentioned here with these edges, okay, they're incredibly sharp. Like I can scratch my skin. I don't know if that's going to show up. Yeah, look at that. I can scratch my skin on those edges like pretty damn easily. There is no radiusing here whatsoever. And to me, that's unacceptable. I mean, really, these 4 corners, you know, because obviously you have two scales, right, are just insanely sharp for a knife of this quality level and this cost, right? And that's not the only place where a bit of fit and finish and comfort has been overlooked. Right here, where the fat carbon ends and the bolster lock kicks in, right? This edge right here is probably the most painful part of the knife. It's not something that you encounter all the time, but when I wrap my hand around the knife, this piece of carbon fiber is digging in right here into this like alley of my finger. I don't know what you call it, but I'm going to call it an alley, okay? And if my finger slides back across that piece of carbon fiber, that is more painful than these top edges, actually. That actually is a legit pain point. Now, that is part of the risk of bolster locks, unless you've taken steps to alleviate that, which, in my opinion, a good designer does, and a good factory should too. And it's not hard, right? Like, look at this. All you have to do is put a mild radius on that. even with like a piece of sandpaper in the factory, they could knock that down. And that also needs to happen with this leading edge right here of the carbon fiber. Just a little bit, and it's not something that I should do. If I'm paying $350 for a knife, like I did with this one, right, that edge should be knocked down from the factory. This edge should be knocked down from the factory, okay? As well as this leading edge. This front leading edge of the bolster is just as painful as this edge and just as scratchy as that edge of the carbon fiber, okay? So for $350, you guys really need to get these kind of details right, you know? And I don't know if anybody else has commented on it, but I'm going to say if they didn't pick up on those issues, shame on you, you know, really, because that's pretty damn glaring. Pretty damn glaring indeed. I mean, they went through the trouble here of rounding the top right here of the bolster, okay? Why couldn't they round this edge? Why couldn't they round that edge? Why couldn't they round this edge, or this edge? And we're not talking by much. I'm talking about like a 0.5 millimeter radius. 0.5 millimeter radius is like damn near invisible in the final product, but it makes a difference. It makes a massive difference. And so I think Jack Wolf needs to have a talk with either whoever does their 3D modeling or the factory or both to resolve those exact issues. Those should not be pain points at all, in particular for a knife of this cost level, right? As far as my critique about the flipper, take it or leave it. You know, I personally don't care. As long as I can reverse flick it, you know, I'm good. Now, here's the thing. Do those pain points come up often for me? Not really, you know, if I'm being honest, because this is not a hard use knife for me, okay? This is my Sunday knife, and this is why I still own the knife, right? Because like for me, those kinds of issues would cause me to send a knife back, to return it, genuinely speaking. However, I've held on to this because the reality is I'll pull this out, I'll use it in a pinch grip, I'll use it to cut, you know, my toast or something at Sunday brunch, you know. This thing is opening up a package here and there. It's not doing hard work. I'm not taking down cardboard boxes with that knife. Now, if I was, I would be much more concerned about that, you know. And if that's what you intend to do with your purchase of this, I'd suggest potentially wearing gloves, to be honest. I do think that those are going to create really uncomfortable hot spots with prolonged use. That's, I guess, where my criticism ends. I mean, ultimately, the best way that I can describe this knife is it's kind of like a jewel, you know? And I may have said that already in this review, but it's pretty. It's very pretty. It's exceedingly pretty, actually. I would argue it's one of the prettier knives that I own. And that's why I like it as like my brunch knife, right? I can carry this, throw it into my pocket, have like a nice kind of purple accented handkerchief. I sit down for brunch with my dad, put this out on the table. Nobody says boo about it, you know. I can open it, use it to cut like a bagel or toast or, you know, my eggs or whatever, right? And, you know, the fact that it's S90V means that I don't really have to do any, you know, like serious upkeep of the blade. It's going to stay sharp for a really long time. And, you know, it's just pretty. It's pretty. I've gotten compliments on it, right? But also, like a jewel, it has some distinct hard edges that I do think are potentially problematic, you know? And it's really fascinating that the front edges of the front half of the knife here has these issues, but the back half has been very clearly chamfered and taken to a point where there are no kind of hard points on the back end. Whether that was done deliberately or not, I think this is stuff that could have been resolved more in the prototype phase, to be 100% honest. So that's my honest review of Jack Wolf Knives. For $350, is it a good knife? Absolutely. Is it the end-all be-all? No, but it's very nice. There's no question. It's really nicely done. Construction is excellent. Runs unbearing, smooth, good action. It's definitely not a fall shutty knife, but it's also a thin blade and very lightweight blade. Love the hollow grind, all of that stuff. Love the anodization, detailing, the purple haze carbon fiber. Again, love, but if I'm going to buy another Jack Wolf knife, particularly at this price point, I got to see some of these issues resolved, and definitely I should not be paying for a knife that can scratch me up at this level by any means.